Hello, and welcome to NSYNC episode 5. I'm your host, Indra's Net, and I'm here today with David Shoemaker. David is an author, artist, musician, clinical psychotherapist, and many other things. And I'm excited to be sitting with David tonight. Been a fan of his offerings to the world of magic and esotericism over the years, and yeah, just been following along all the great work he's been doing, and excited to hear about what he's got going on these days. And so, David, how are you? Thank you for joining us tonight. 93.
93. I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Heck yeah. So, David, would you mind telling us maybe a little bit about yourself? Like, I know you're kind of an active, maybe, leading voice in the Thelemic world these days. You know, how did you come to Magic, and who are you and what do you do? You know?
I ask myself that every day. Uh,
Yeah,
I
right.
well, yeah, probably the earliest roots is I came from a family that was both musical and on my mom's side spiritual leaning, on my dad's side philosophical leaning. He's a philosophy professor, so I grew up in kind of an interesting stew of worldviews and skills and such. But I emerged with a sense of interest in helping people. And that got me into clinical psychology as a profession. And so I've been a therapist for more than 30 years now. And in the process, I was doing music all along. That's always been an important thing in my heart and soul, even if I wasn't at times doing much with it professionally or anything. Guitarist and keyboard player. So that was kind of my spiritual path. I didn't call it that, but that's what was connecting me to
Right,
something
right.
bigger and deeper. I'm sure as a musician you understand.
Mhm.
But at some point in grad school, I was already interested in the work of Carl Jung, the psychologist Carl Jung. But I realized that the thing that was appealing to me about Carl Jung in particular was that his theories has space for the mystery of life. It has He was esoterically inclined in terms of his own understandings of things, explorations of alchemy and such. And I realized I was looking for a path, not just a clinical orientation, to follow. So that got me reading up. Eventually, found my way to Israel Regardie's book, The Middle Pillar, which is where he talks about Jung and Kabbalistic psychology and connects that to Crowley's work. And so that's how I got into Crowley, and then the rest was history. But that was in the mid early 90s, in the midst of my doctoral program. And so I joined the OTO and the AA, and been working in those traditions ever since 1993. Good year. And at present, I'm deeply involved in the administration of AA, and in other realms. The Temple of the Silver Star is a Golden Dawn patterned Thelemic organization that I administer. And of course, I've been also working in the OTO ever since, and U.S. Grand Lodge. And um, so, interesting mix of stuff there that keeps me busy. Uh, and of course, for those who don't know, I've written a couple books that people seem to enjoy. Living Thelema, that grew out of a podcast that I did for many years, and the follow up book from a couple years ago is The Way of the Will. Um, so for those who have graduated from Living Thelema, you might want to pick that up. Also did a book on my explorations of the 30 Enochian Aethers called The Winds of Wisdom, and that's just my record of doing it, and all the technical tools you would need to replicate it. Um, so that's been a lot of it. I also edited a lot of historical compilations of the writings of like Phyllis Seckler, my teacher, Sora Merrill,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I love
uh,
Phyllis.
and Carl Germer, of course, Jane Wolfe. Um, and it's been a really fulfilling journey. I'm looking forward to the next 93 years.
Yeah, right. That's really cool, man. Yeah, it's yeah, I've got to say I have that book. I believe it's like the Thoth Tarot
Mhm.
and Jungian psychology, maybe I think, by Sower
You're,
Morales might have edited that
yeah,
one.
and the first volume of her collected writings that we did focuses a lot on the psychology of the tarot and also the her approach to astrology.
Mhm.
And there's some otherwise unpublished correspondence in there and some old photos. It's a cool package.
Yeah, yeah. I love that work, man. I mean, I feel like Phyllis, her voice in Thelema like is really just one that I'm just like every time I read her work and just like I'm just grateful that spirit like her
Yeah,
incarnated and shared her light, because
yeah,
I love that work of hers, and thank you
me
for
too.
helping share that and continue her lineage. um so
Yeah, that's
yeah,
very
I
important to
want
me.
yeah, that's awesome. I'm grateful for it too, and yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit because part of this show that I'm doing here is like um it's about synchronicity, mysticism,
Mm-hmm.
hermeticism, healing and all this stuff, and like I kind of wanted to ask you about like how you came to be in your life like at this point to where you're involved in this esoteric facilitation, work on earth, you know what I mean? Like in your life, like how did you come to that place? Like what drew you into magic and psychotherapy and the kind
Mm-hmm.
of healing and liberating work that you seem to be kind of trying to do?
Well, it's interesting to talk about this sort of thing in light of synchronicity because I do feel like when we live each day with an expectancy that we're going to get clues about the right path for ourselves, um, we do get clues,
Mhm.
and it's easy to minimize that or kind of rationalize it as we find what we're looking for or something like that. But my experiences has taught me many times that we don't find what we're looking for. We find what we need, and sometimes it's exactly not what we think we're looking for at the time. We're not looking for anything, and it kind of falls in our lap. But for me, there are some touchstones that really were formative and kind of inspiring in ways I didn't know where they were leading at the time, but in retrospect, it's clear. Like discovering when I started playing guitar in high school, that some of the musicians I discovered there, like most prominently Robert Fripp and his work with King Crimson and his teaching in guitarcraft. Um, all I knew at the time was uh, I want to play guitar and get better at it and so on. So I went to one of his courses. I was 16 at the time. Went to one of his courses and Robert Fripp's courses, guitarcraft in West Virginia, which was close to where my parents were living at the time. And at that uh, course, instead of, to my surprise, playing a lot of guitar all the time, we did meditation first thing in the morning. We did sort of mindfulness sitting sessions. There were other somatic activities. We had challenges to play. Okay, here now you guys work up something and play it for everyone else at lunch. Stuff like that that just made me come alive with possibilities, and still didn't walk out of there thinking, "Oh, I need a spiritual path" or anything like that. So that was one of them. Another was being in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, going to graduate school and just happening to find that there were some Thelemic activities. The OTO and other groups were active nearby miraculously because there's not much anything happened there. And
Yeah.
and so that's one of those it fell in my lap things. Like I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but found it anyway. And that kind of started me on the path I've been on in terms of therapy. It was a decision in college that I thought I was maybe going to go to med school or something, but I realized I really just wanted to help people in a more direct interpersonal kind of way, and not by um, performing surgery on them, but
Mhm.
by by talking with him. So all the vectors of force and such kind of aligned to get me where I am.
That's cool. I like to hear that too, because as like I've been a student of Aleister Crowley myself, and
Hmm.
people don't often associate Aleister Crowley with healing. Like
Mm.
that's like
They should,
uh
but they don't.
the Yellow Press did a good job of making
Yeah.
sure that it's
Yeah.
hard to get to the core of what is really offered with Thelema, but I think it's so beautiful that you're involved in that healing work with people, and I wanted to ask you, I guess, like while we're in this interview, like um people, there's a lot of misconceptions about Aleister Crowley, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
other, right opinions about Aleister Crowley too, or whatever, right?
Sure. Sure.
But I do feel as a person in this world, in this time, who you know, has digested and been nourished by the light, that's been offered from that lane and stuff. I would say, like, for you, like, if you were to speak to somebody right now who needed to like have an understanding of Thelema, like how would you
Hmm.
put it right now, to put it easily, like what you think Thelema is really to offer the world, amidst all the misconceptions of Aleister Crowley's life and stuff,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I'll speak to the misconceptions in a moment, but I think the key is like every other force of nature, whether it's a tree or a river or wind, each human has a way of being in the world that is unique to them. And this we call the true will. It is the will of God or the universe, however you want to think of it, that expresses itself through the individual life of a human. And the task in the system of Thelema is to discover what our way of being is, to discover our true will, and then do our best to build a life around it to support it. And when each person does their best to do that, the world tends to work better because people
Right.
stay in their own lanes. And of course, a big part of this is not just doing that for yourself, but leaving others plenty of space to do that for themselves. So we're not getting in other people's business, and we're hoping they don't get in ours, and we're just trying to do what's right as best we can by being tapped into that sense of the true will. So it's a vision for how each individual can evolve into the fullest best version of themselves, but it's also a vision of how that helps the entire world function better and have less conflict and uh, in much more harmonious way with nature and each other.
Yeah, I love that, and I feel like it's really important in the times that we're in. There's like so much information going around out there now, and
Hmm.
there's still a lot of fear that lives in a lot of people's hearts, and so
Sure.
when people are coming to the occult and Thelema and stuff, there's a lot of distortion,
Right.
that comes around it, and um, I'm glad that folks like yourself have been called to, share your clarity about the path and the great work, and how we carry a legacy, in this
Yeah.
occult tradition. And how that legacy is larger than individuals,
Right.
um, so I guess I wanted to also ask you a little bit about the AA path. Like I
Hmm.
also was a member of the AA. I was in a lineage, and um, you know I myself worked up to the Zelda grade and chose to part ways for my own reasons.
Hmm.
But I love the AA as a model. I think it's truly one of the most beautiful offerings I think that's ever been laid out for planet Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I guess I wanted to ask you, as you in your life approach the system of the AA, and you have your background in psychology,
Hmm.
um, if you were to try to explain the system of the AA to folks that are maybe new to Thelema, occultism. How would you explain the path of the AA and maybe some of the work that you do with your lineage and the Temple of the
Yeah.
Silver Star? You tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the AA, to clarify for people who are maybe newer to this, is not Alcoholics Anonymous. We're talking about
Mhm.
the magical organization that Crowley started with George Cecil Jones in 1907. And the idea was to have a one-to-one teacher-student foundation for the whole thing. So it's not a social organization or a fraternal organization. It's really a teaching organization. And that's done aside from a couple early, couple temple initiation ceremonies early in the system. Everything's individual with your
Right.
teacher. Everybody has one teacher, but you could have multiple students, as Crowley
Right.
did, and lots of other people did.
And it's done through the
Um,
mail, right? You don't really have a physical teacher. It's usually through the
uh,
mail, right?
well, no, I mean, the frankly, the way it's supposed to work is that you meet in person with your teacher for
The
the initial
neophyte.
reception as a probationer, and
Mm,
then you get together with your teacher as often as you can. However, sometimes there is geographical separation, so you might be largely emailing or doing Zoom calls or whatever.
right.
But all the initiations that are in the temple are, of course, in person. So it gives there's a lot of latitude for modern humans having busy lives still making this work because you're able to, especially with our technology now, you're able to be in touch with your teacher. But
Mm,
I just don't want people to misunderstand that it's like a correspondence course or that it's just astral initiations at a distance or something.
no,
And this
right,
this is
right,
this is
right.
the real deal. But um, so in any case, the system of AA was designed by Crowley and Jones to collect the most functional and efficient tools from any religious system or spiritual system in the world that had them on offer and synthesize those tools into a system that would take someone step by step, taught by someone who'd already done the stuff that they're presently doing, um, through a path of growing self awareness, magical and mystical competence, meaning yoga and meditation, and in addition to ceremonial magic training, um, aligning that with what we would today call tantric or kundalini kind of energy work, and culminating in as the primary first attainment, the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, which is a term that Crowley used as one of many options for describing basically a kind of an enlightenment experience where we become more consciously in touch with um, what you could call God, or you could call your holy guardian angel, or you could call anything you like. But the fact is that there is a quality of consciousness that emerges and becomes more vibrantly a part of our everyday awareness when we get to that stage, including a deeper awareness of our true will. So this is the pathway to, in an initiatory context, getting that awareness of true will. Um, the the thing this comes back to misconceptions about Crowley. The thing that I think we're a little bit cursed with in the modern age is we have so many examples of flawed spiritual leaders because, of course, they've been recent, and we have the ability to look back at all kinds of horror stories in the past 100 years or so of abusive cult leaders or other misguided individuals, and of course abuses within major world traditions. You don't have to look too far to see what some mainstream churches have done, and that's horrific. Um, but in the instance of Thelema, there's no expectation, unlike say Christianity, there's no expectation that any adherent to Thelema is supposed to be like Crowley.
Right.
You're not trying to replicate his life or behavior, or it's not be Crowley like we might say be Christ like or something. It's
Right.
just do these steps and become yourself. So um, one of the biggest misconceptions is that because Crowley was a flawed human like all of us, uh, somehow the system must be flawed. Um, and I think it's understandable, but it's still kind of silly that if people expect that, are we waiting for someone perfect to create a perfect system, and that's the only one that will count? Um,
Right.
there's going to be a lot of waiting for that one.
Mhm.
That's all to say that what I think Crowley left us is a fantastic system that works, and I've seen this over decades now. I mean, I've supervised hundreds of people directly or indirectly, and in terms of their daily work, and I can't tell you how many diaries I've read over the years and
Right.
so on. Um, and so that's the AA. In the Temple of the Silver Star, which is another organization I administer, this is patterned after the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in terms of some of the grade structure, the tasks that you're tested on and get trained on as you move up the Tree of Life degrees. Um, but it's all Thelemic also. So we're an unbroken lineal successor to the Golden Dawn through the Alpha and Omega and Builders of the Adytum and some other groups in between them and us. But it's unbroken and has never stopped being worked in a living way month to month in temples. So this is a social, fraternal expression of an initiatory tradition, and that's we have groups around the world in the U.S. and other continents. So that's that's most of where I spend my time. It's AA and Temple of the Silver Star work.
Wow, that's really cool, and I love to hear it. So I know you're also an artist and a composer and stuff as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your musical life? What's
Sure,
your musical journey been like in
sure.
life?
Well, you flatter me by calling me an artist. I want to clarify that I'm definitely not a visual artist because I would be terrible at that. But if artist means musician, which I think is how you're intending
Well,
it,
I
yes,
think so, right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So again, I had my origin story sort of with the work with Robert Fripp and the guitar craft, but
Mhm.
um, over the years, always been at least a hobbyist musician. I've done things a little more on the quasi-professional level, like I've done a film score in the early 2000s, and I did
Oh, cool.
for feature film, and I
You mind if
did
I ask what that was?
yeah, it's called Elsa Letterseed. It was made in Sacramento, which is where I was living at the time. Independent film, kind of a
Very cool.
black comedy. Didn't do wonders at the box office or anywhere else, but it was fun and
I'll
definitely a
check that
learning
out. It
experience in
sounds
terms of
cool.
a lot of music to make for that movie. Um,
Exciting.
and I was in a band called Last Three Lives around that time, and we have two albums out. Um, and then I did the last release so far was about 10 years ago. When I released sort of a compilation of solo electronic work and also some band highlights and movie score highlights. So all of that, if you find me on Bandcamp, you can just go there and you get all that music, also Apple and Spotify and stuff. But that's always been a living and breathing part of me. It's just in various points in my life, whether because of raising my son or just being busy building a career and that sort of thing, wasn't able to spend all my time with it, but had a major resurgence here in the last couple years. Did a songwriting course with Brian Eno, and just came back from a few months ago
Wow,
from Peter Gabriel's studio in England, recording a track there. And
that's cool.
just yesterday had a drummer that worked with me at those sessions, adding tracks to some of my recent stuff. So I have an album coming out uh, very late this year or very early 2027. The cool thing about this for me right now is that this album is tracks that I've written. A lot of it is tracks that I've written across my magical path. So, like, there's a song that I wrote when I was first starting out that I've never released. And this album is going to have moments like that reflect my state of mind at certain points in my path. And it'll be more or less chronological on the album. So you can trace like Thelemic initiatory journey that's almost like a musical diary from the time
That's
um,
cool.
right up to where I am now. So it's not only that, and it's going to be a pretty eclectic album, but I'm really looking forward to kind of getting this out there and talking more about it. And I hope it'll be not just musically enjoyable, but also kind of inspirational from the initiatory perspective.
Wow, yeah, that's so cool to hear. I'm excited to check that out too.
Mm.
It's funny you mentioned that too. I actually just this year was asked to score a independent film for the first time
Oh,
myself. Oops,
cool.
sorry, I'm having a little bit of a power issue here. Hopefully, I think it's okay. Okay. Um, but yeah, I scored a independent horror movie, and it's through a friend that I had in the punk scene many years ago. But
Mm,
he knew that I'm an occultist and that I also make
mm,
electronic music. And I
mm,
guess in the film they had a scene that was like in a club, and he was like, "Man, Kev, I feel like your music must be perfect for this scene."
mm.
And so I contributed 2 songs, and then I guess the director was like, "Man, I feel like nothing else sounds right now. Like, can you just score the whole movie?" And so I guess hopefully this spooky season, I think it comes out maybe in October or something. But I gave over my whole catalog of unreleased electronic material because when they asked me for more music, I was like, well, dang, I could just give you all my
Yeah,
experiments and see what happens.
cool.
But it was beautiful. It was kind of synchronistic that some of these tracks that were rather aimless in my experimental process, um, only when I saw the final cut of the film did I see that the music kind of synced right up with the
Mm.
film, even though I wrote the music 7 years before the film was dreamed. You know what I mean? And it was like a
Yeah,
beautiful thing of synchrony where I was like, wow, the aimless moments in that track are for this film 7 years in the future. What the
yeah,
heck? It's like
yeah,
funny, trippy stuff to think about when you get to sharing your art like that. But
yeah. That's
it's
great.
exciting to hear that you're doing some scoring and stuff too. I'm kind of hoping that maybe it's a thing that opens up for me more, like 'cause I love
Mm,
experimenting with music. Um, and I guess I wanted to maybe talk to you a little bit about that too. Is like I've noticed,
mhm,
I talked to some different voices in the occult and different esoteric circles, and a lot of us are also artists or creators in
mhm.
some way. Um, in your like, I know you were just saying that like your music has always been kind of a representation of your initiation. That's kind of how all art goes anyway, right? But like
Yeah,
would you say for as an artist, your magical path, like how would you speak to the way that these worlds weave together? Like I know for me, they kind of have blended into one in a sense later in my life, um, but
yeah,
it's interesting. There's a lot of crossover with people that come to spiritual work and magic, particularly, like that idea of the movement of the soul, or um, would you have any thoughts to share about that? Like how music
yeah.
and art creation flow for you?
Absolutely. I've been thinking a lot about this lately because I'm presenting on this topic, sort of the uh, Thelemic influences, specifically in music.
Mhm.
Talking on that at Thelemicon, which is an online, open to the public Thelemic conference that's happening this October, and thelemicon.org. And um, in my thinking around this lately, I really come to feel that the essence of creativity, true creativity, is an absolutely parallel path with being in touch with our spiritual selves. It doesn't matter if we call it that or experience it that way or have religious labels for it or anything like that. I think it's just a matter of getting in touch with a deeper source and being a channel for that.
Wow.
You can talk to many musicians and creative people generally that will talk about feeling like something's working through them rather than I'm just thinking of all this stuff and doing it.
Mhm.
So I think the reason for that is that the same processes that allow us to get out of our own way as an ego, and make room for a spiritual life, um, for our higher self to kind of speak to us. I think that's exactly what's happening here, except it's the artistic muse or spirit that comes through us that way.
totally. Yeah, it's funny. The other day I just wrote a little Substack article, and I think I called it like on the alchemy and aura of punk. And I was thinking about how, a punk used to be a term they used for like a little stick, like a hot-headed end of a stick that you'd use to like
Mm,
light a firework or whatever.
mm,
And apparently it was also a term for prostitutes. That's apparently the
didn't know that.
first usage of the term punk was for prostitutes. And so I've been meditating on how punk, it carries this very like Promethean, Luciferian kind of, the like I was thinking about the hothead, the punk, the mohawk. I was even thinking about how the lion's mane, like hair as an extension of this I don't know, the
Mm,
solar force of Kundalini,
right,
and punk
right.
and mohawks and hotheads. I don't know. All it was like stirring up into like a poetic understanding for me of how yeah, like punk rock and roll and even pop music, like it's like there's like a torch there, that like
Yeah,
that the artist holds, like even,
yeah.
like the goddess, holding the torch. There's something to Venus and the light bearer, you know what I mean? Like
Mm,
I
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. I just reflect on all these things as I look at my own past as a musician and a punk and an initiate and all these things. And I see it swirling into, a kind of a singular truth,
Right.
that
Yeah, yeah.
the AA is very, that's very much what we do with our understanding of things. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I've just been
Hmm.
reflecting on that a lot lately about how rock and roll and punk and the Motorhead, you know what I mean? There's the, that beast energy, the creation, So I don't know. It's just something I think about when I think
Yeah,
about,
that's
um,
great.
like all that stuff. And the more I talk to other folks that I find are grounded in this occult work, magic, you know, self-knowledge, self-mastery, it often attracts, people that are involved in a craft of some kind or whatever, So it's cool to hear that you're another, a fellow musician, who's like also swirling your own initiation into your art and all that. You know what I mean? I
I
think
think we
that's
can't help but do it, so we might as well be conscious of it. I'm
yeah,
kind of
right. Yeah,
paraphrasing what Crowley says about magic there. Uh,
exactly right. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I also like, I guess I wanted to ask you, because like in these days, some of what I do with my work of kind of like taking my esoteric study and I look up out upon the world, I look at pop,
Mm,
I look how the world moves, and I try to see how, creation moves in sync. It's like as we move through
mm,
every sign of the year, it seems like we all collectively like move into um, like our own unfolding together. And as we move through every sign of the year, I find that, even the movies in the theaters and things that happen in pop, they're like this outward expression of the soul of
mm.
humanity. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
part
yeah,
of what I'm trying to do with this show, NSYNC, is to kind of help point out the way that like we all are tied together in these big, beautiful natural patterns,
yeah.
and I think as occultists, we are just but students of that pattern, who try to
Mm,
celebrate and accentuate its existence. You know what I
right,
mean?
right.
Is for you like as we've been moving through the summer of 2026, is there any like films or art or anything that you feel
Mm.
that's been moving you or stuff that you feel called to speak to as we like are moving through this like summer and this period of I don't know disclosure and all this big stuff happening, any
Right.
thoughts on the how the world's soul is speaking you know
Mhm. I think there's all kinds of micro ways I could talk about that. First, like for example, as a therapist, I've done nothing for the last 30 plus years but spend every work day, all day, talking to people about their inner lives. So I have a pretty
Mhm.
good idea of what are the patterns or what are the trends, in inner lives. And what's always been uncanny to me is how of course, these people don't know each other, right? They just happen to show up at my office at different times. And I'll get a rash of people like all in the same 2 weeks with the same kind of idiosyncratic issue they want to work on. And it's not something that would be so widely common that you say, well, of course, there's always going to be a bunch of people wanting to work on anxiety or whatever, but really specific stuff. Or I'll be working with several people, and in the same period of time, the same kind of dreams pop up, with themes and symbols that seem to cross pollinate in strange ways. So that's kind of on a day to day little level for me. I can watch consciousness from that vantage point, it's very fascinating. But of course, in keeping with Jung's work and what you were just saying, there's like we are all attached to each other at deeper collective levels of mind, and that
Mhm.
sort of sprouts out in conscious awareness sometimes, and sometimes it sprouts out in cultural, mythological, artistic themes. And I think that's really the heart of what you're getting at, that we might see things in artistic culture that are a barometer of where the culture as a whole is at a given time. um, I think I'm not going to be able to come up with a real specific, this musical artist or this movie or whatever. But I think what I'm feeling is, in the midst of everyone's more or less moderate to severe anxiety state right now, that it seems almost universal around the world. Um, my hope, watching history, is that it is these moments that feel most threatening and most dire where the greatest potential exists for positive change and evolution, that may not make it comfortable, and it may get worse before it gets better. But I think what we have now is a bunch of people paying attention to what they feel is going off track, you know, and to some extent that just keeps us afraid, but to another extent that also, if we're taking care of ourselves in the process, that allows us to maybe have some insights into how to change it, what could be better, how could I be better, how could this system be better. um, and so I'm not naive about the shit that can go down, and how that, as I said, might get worse before it gets better. But when I think of our political strife, I think of emerging AI, I think of the siloing effect of social media and all of that. These are real issues, that that aren't good, but hold the promise for me, I think, of positive change. And I'm not ashamed to be hopeful and optimistic. That's just my nature. And I think we can't expect our hope to be reasonable. We just expect to keep it. That's we. I'll,
Mhm.
I'll keep my hope, whether anyone thinks it's reasonable or not.
Mhm. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. I was just
I'm
talking to a
paraphrasing
friend.
Robert Fripp there a little bit, by the way,
Oh yeah,
talking
hey,
about hope being unreasonable.
all right, let's go. I love that. Yeah, I was talking to a friend today a little bit about that, about how how cartoonish the evils that we face are in the world, particularly
Yeah,
in the United States today, and
yeah,
how I think, if you look at the myth of life,
mm,
um, the world is calling upon us to respond appropriately to cartoonish evil. you know,
yeah,
I think,
yeah.
as whatever that means, being a good American, being a whatever, you know what I'm
Mm,
saying? Like,
of course.
I think we face cartoonish levels of evil, but to me that means that we are arriving at beautiful uh levels of like response to that, like goodness knows itself in the face of that uh
Right.
darkness, and so I, like I said, that hope that you have, I got that heart, like I really feel it, because as much as we see the world slipping into um what we know is off balance and whatever, like to me, it only highlights what is, and
Mhm.
so yeah, that hope is really real to me too. I'm glad
Yeah,
you vibe
great.
with that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not a cultural climate right now where uh, there's much space or attention given to people who aren't saying dire warnings about things, you know?
mhm.
And part of that is that feeds clicks and so on. But uh, another part is that trains a culture about what to continue paying attention to is, the algorithm of look at the next scary thing, and point fingers in the appropriate ways and who do we blame and get mad at and so on. So I think we all know this is happening. And there's just not much space, I think, or as I said, or attention given to people who don't want to play that. Um, and I try to do my best to not play that and just be helping people in the way I can. Which is, by the one reason I'm hopeful about change in the world, because everyone has the power to do what they can if they just pay attention to what they can do. And that's how it's always changed things. It's always been that way.
Totally. I
Yeah.
love one of the old homies, Robert Anton Wilson, had that
Mhm.
great quote that was there's a powerful group of people running the world and affecting my life, and it's me and my friends.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
right.
think that's a really important thing. I think that as we all carry on into the future of that, all we ever really have is the radiance of our light, you know what I mean? And like I think we would be shooting ourselves in the foot to think that we can't do anything if we can't light up the whole world. But as long as we all light up our coordinates,
Very good.
then the whole
Yeah.
world lights up. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think that's the AA light. You know what I mean? And
Right.
and
Comes
and
back to the
that's
true will
that's
concept I was saying before about how each individual does that, but collectively, then it adds up to a better world.
exactly. And I've got a deep certainty, not faith, actually about these things. Um, but yeah, man. Well, I've been really enjoying this chat so far too. I'm wondering what have you got going on in the future? What's
Okay.
the 2026, 2027? What's it look like for you?
Yeah. So I mentioned the books I put out in the last few years. And so I'm kind of taking a breather from writing and focusing more on music at the moment. Of
Hmm.
course, doing a lot of administering of the groups and so on. But that's at least a three-quarter time job for me.
All right.
And so I expect the new album to be out again late this year, early next year. Got Thelema coming up in October. Again, that's the next sort of public um, appearance or speaking engagement I'm doing. Um, I do go for Temple of the Silver Star and AA work pretty much every year over to England, and so now musical work too. So people can count on something happening over there from me publicly around September of next year, I think. So a little ways out. Um, but that's the immediate horizon. I'm holed up in my music studio a lot these days and working on stuff and really enjoying that. Um, but in the coming few years, we'll push it out a little bit. I'd like to do some writing for the general public, sort of the lay public, if you think of it from a non esoteric perspective. But what would a thelemically inclined psychologist write as a self help book? You know,
Hmm.
and wouldn't it be nice for us um, Thelemites if all our friends and family had that kind of self help book? you know, um, so that's what I'm trying to. That's kind of the platform I'm trying to wrap my head around, and of course building on all the work I've been doing in therapy with people all these years. I got a lot of little tools and ways of thinking about things I tend to pull out to help somebody if they're kind of depressed or if they're kind of anxious or they're having relationship issues. But just not any jargon, just kind of helping them. Uh, so that may be a longer term project, uh, but it's been wonderful to talk to you today. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, and I would look forward to, maybe having you back on in the future too. Like,
Sure.
I hope to, this is just the first season of this podcast, and I feel like I'm also just trying to kind of like, welcome folks into these like, layers of reality that have maybe been on their periphery or whatever. And
Hmm.
as an artist and a writer and whatever in my life, I'm just trying to like, yeah, open up some space for light and to highlight some stars that are shining and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And so I would love to
Yeah,
have
of
you back
course.
on sometime. And
Love
because
to.
I've always just really loved your approach to Thelema, to self-development and like the work you're doing in the world. So thanks for all the work you've done. And
Oh, you're
I
welcome. Thank you.
definitely would recommend anybody check out David's books and podcasts. I've always really loved them. And I'd look forward to having you back on for a chat again in the future. I feel like this is just the first first hang, so I would look forward
Sure.
to another time to hang out.
Sounds great. And congratulations on getting things started here.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for episode 5 of In Sync. And please follow up with David's work. I'll have links in the details of the YouTube and Spotify and other resources. So please stay in tune, follow up with David, and stay in sync. Be well, y'all. 93. In the recording. Okay, I'm just gonna hit stop on the recording here. Oops, sorry. This thing's bugging here.